In the autumn of 2000, Japanese census workers were out in full force, going door to door, conducting the National Population Survey. One such census taker had been assigned to Kameido, a quiet residential district in East Tokyo. His route included the Rek Kameido Green Mansion, a fairly pricey complex favoured by young professionals. For 3 days straight, from September 26th to the 28th, he visited room 604, but on each occasion, nobody answered the door. Nothing about those earlier attempts seemed unusual. The tenant was probably just at work. But when he returned on Friday the 29th, he noticed something that he hadn't before. A sour, almost chemical stench seeping from the unit's ventilation fan into the corridor. Suspicious, he contacted the building's manager, who arrived at 1 PM and tried the handle. And to his surprise, the door was already unlocked. The two men stepped into a silent apartment heavy with the smell of decay. In the bedroom, they discovered the body of the unit's sole occupant, 28-year-old manga artist Yoko Yoshida. She had been living alone in that same room since 1995, and now was lying face up on a futon, wearing only a t-shirt, undressed from the waist down. A white cloth had been laid neatly across her face. Her skin had browned, her body had bloated, and experts say that she had been dead for at least 10 days. Faint marks around her neck pointed towards her COD. Somebody had strangled her to death with their bare hands. Nothing in the room was ransacked. Yoko's wallet, bankbook, cards, and roughly 3 million yen in cash were still sitting untouched on her desk, and despite her state of undress, there were no signs of sexual assault, no male DNA on or around the body, and no signs of a struggle whatsoever. One curious detail unsettled detectives. A spare key, one which Yoko always kept inside the apartment, was found lying in the hallway outside her door. Beyond that, there was nothing. No fingerprints, no CCTV footage, and crucially, no evidence of a forced entry. Everything pointed towards one conclusion: that Yoko had either willingly let her killer in, or the killer already had access to her apartment. Detectives began with the obvious questions. Who did Yoko know? Who did she work with? Were there any disputes in her personal life? As they pieced together her existence, they realized that Yoko's circle was extensive. As mentioned, she worked as an independent manga artist. Under the pen name Sukisaki Cool, she wrote, illustrated, and self-published BL Dojinshi, niche LGBT romance stories. She wasn't a household name by any means, but within Tokyo's underground comic scene, she was fairly well known, and had many friends and acquaintances within the community. Her writing was bright, energetic, humorous, and a little eccentric, and the few fans she had adored her. But could one of them have adored her too much? Like most doujin creators at the time, Yoko printed her real home address in the colophon of her books, a quirk of 90s printing culture, but one that meant any fan, stranger, or opportunist knew exactly where she lived. Any of them could have paid her an unsolicited visit, and Yoko, known for her kind and trusting nature, may well have invited them in for tea. But her address being public knowledge also raised another possibility. Because doujin artists rarely earned enough to survive off their work alone, throughout the 90s and early noughties, they were often targeted by scouts from the adult entertainment industry. Vultures who trawled comic conventions looking for young, pretty, friendly creators. They'd buy a book, copy the address from the colophon, wait outside the artist's apartment and bump into them, and then pitch a high-paying, part-time job opportunity. And it's plausible the same thing happened to Yoko. According to the people who knew her, she had started working nights at a members-only club in Shibuya, and was allegedly serving as a call girl for wealthy clients. Among her customers, it was rumoured, were minor celebrities and comedians. Police noted the expensive clothing, designer bags, and high-end jewellery found in her room, things she never wore and had no real interest in. Friends said that she preferred quirky, thrifted styles. Investigators suspected the luxury items were gifts from rich clients, and the 3 million yen in cash suggested payment. Reports claimed that at her peak, Yoko earned between 30 to 50,000 yen per night, roughly $280 to $470 at the time. The demand had begun to fall as she got older, and she was reportedly preparing to quit her nighttime job and move back in with her parents. Question is, could one of those clients have taken things too far before she did? Investigators interviewed Yoko's co-workers and her employer, but nothing concrete emerged. Some believe her workplace was simply protecting their powerful clients. Others say that the customers themselves quietly shut down the inquiry. And with no viable suspects, the investigation stalled. 4 years later, the case was thrust back into the spotlight thanks to a TV Asahi program called Terebi no Chikara, a long-running investigative show that often revisited cold cases and featured dramatic reenactments, psychic inputs, and public appeals. During this broadcast, a British man called Chris Robinson, known professionally as the Psychic Dreamer, was brought on to help solve Yoko's case. He claimed to have worked with MI5 and said that he could dream crime scenes in advance. He claimed that, through his mind's eye, he had seen the killer leave Yoko's building, go to JR Kamedo Station, and board a blue streetcar. In fact, his vision was so clear that he even produced this sketch of the suspect, saying that he was between 25 to 35 years old, around 165 centimeters tall with a medium build, was South Asian, and had deep-set features. His desperate bid for attention resulted in dozens of callers getting in contact with the show, accusing various foreign residents of being the culprit. Among those callers was a man known simply as Mr. A, who claimed to be Yoko's manager. He told producers that he possessed a letter written by Yoko shortly before her death, in which he described how she was being harassed by a foreign stalker. It sounded sensational, exactly the sort of twist that a TV special thrives on, and so the broadcasters invited Mr. A on to share the letter. It read as follows: "I might be killed in 2 or 3 days. I have a feeling that I'm being watched. The person is a fan of my work and lives in my neighborhood. He writes strange notes to me every day, and he isn't Japanese, which scares me even more." Behind A's back, the show had the letter analysed by a specialist, who stated with 100% certainty that the handwriting didn't match Yoko's. It did, however, match perfectly with Mr. A's. On camera, A was confronted by a former police interrogator. Under pressure, he admitted he wasn't Yoko's manager at all, and that he had forged the note out of jealousy. As a fellow cartoonist, and part of Yoko's inner circle, he felt overshadowed by her modest amount of success, but insisted he had nothing to do with her death. Police never named A as a suspect, but the incident cast a long shadow over the investigation, muddying public perception and leading to years of speculation involving foreign stalkers. Mr. A never faced any repercussions for trying to pin the blame on a local gaijin, nor did dream detective Chris Robinson. One's a proven liar, the other may just be delusional. But what if this pair of goobers succeeded, and an innocent man was arrested as a result? Would they have come clean about making up their stories then? Somehow, I doubt it. Mr. A's admission that he and others envied Yoko did lead some to wonder whether a fellow artist could have been involved. The doujinshi community is said to be very insular, and Yoko's inner circle did reportedly close ranks when investigators and reporters came asking for information. However, they have since defended themselves, saying that they were only standoffish because the police openly looked down on their line of work and mocked them for being into, quote, weird stuff. No evidence ever came to light implicating any of them. One Japanese commentator who has dug deeply into this case has put forward a different idea, one that shifts the focus away from fans and clients and back inside the building itself. Over on his channel, YouTuber Himuro Eisuke points to several small details that don't add up. The fact that the census worker visited Yoko's door repeatedly between the 26th and 28th without noticing any strong smell, yet on the 29th was suddenly hit by an overpowering stench leaking from the ventilation fan. The way Yoko's spare key was found in the 6th floor hallway only after police arrived despite residents and the census worker coming and going for days, and the fact that there was no sign of a struggle within the apartment, nor any unknown DNA on the bed, despite Yoko's lower body being left exposed. His reading is that Yoko may not have been killed in her own bedroom at all, but in another apartment inside the same complex, and that her body was moved back to room 604 later using the key on her person. In this version, the killer was a fellow resident or an insider with private access, someone who knew Yoko was planning to move out soon, and who panicked when the census worker came sniffing around. According to Himuro's theory, this imagined killer went back on the morning of the 29th, switched on the fan to force the smell into the corridor, left the door unsecured, and dropped her spare key in the hallway. A calculated bit of staging designed to push investigators towards a simple lover with a key scenario. It's only a theory, and not one the police have endorsed, but it underlines just how many questions about Yoko's final hours still remain, and the ways in which people are trying to make the loose pieces of this puzzle fit. 25 years later, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police still list Yoko Yoshida's murder as an active investigation, one of the many unsolved cases from the late 90s and early 2000s that slipped through the cracks. And unless new information surfaces, the truth behind what happened inside, or perhaps outside room 604, may remain a mystery. This message is sponsored by Raycon. Even though Halloween's over, I still spend a lot of time listening to true crime podcasts, creepy tales, and gothic music. So when I find gear that keeps me connected and aware of what's going on around me, that's a win. Which is why I'm such a big fan of Raycon's bone conduction headphones. Instead of sitting in your ears, they use bone conduction to send sound through tiny vibrations in your bones. That way, your ears stay open. You can still hear traffic, people, everything that's going on around you, while your music and podcasts come through crystal clear. I've been using mine while writing scripts and going for night walks, and honestly, they've been great. They last ages too, 13 hours of battery, are fully waterproof and dustproof, and the fit doesn't slip. Black Friday is around the corner, and Raycon audio products are up to 30% off site-wide. From everyday essentials to the latest releases, it's the perfect time to upgrade your sound or get ahead on gifting. These early deals won't last, so shop now before they're gone. Just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/masqueradebc to save on Raycon audio products site-wide. Japan has long been cited as one of the safest countries in the world. Those who have visited have no doubt seen small children walking to and from school alone, people leaving their laptops unattended in cafes to use the bathroom, and commuters dozing off on crowded trains without having to clutch onto their bags. For many locals, danger feels distant, something that happens elsewhere. But that perception doesn't tell the whole story. While Japan's overall crime rate is indeed low, violence against women and girls remains a persistent and deeply underreported problem. The result is a society that appears safe on the surface, but which hides a darker undercurrent. One where predators exploit the trust and complacency that defines everyday life in the nation. One where guards are lowered, blind spots are plentiful, and where all a monster needs is one thing: a window of opportunity. Nana Sakuma was born in 1978 in Chiba Prefecture, just east of Tokyo. Her parents divorced when she was still very young, and she grew up living with her mother and grandmother in a modest, single-story apartment in Omiodai. To keep the household afloat, her mother worked long nights as a hostess at a local snack bar, and while she was away, Nana's elderly grandmother was lenient with rules, and that meant it wasn't unusual for Nana to stay up late or wander around the neighborhood after dark. Not that there was anything to worry about, of course. Omiodai was a tight-knit community, and most locals knew the bright, well-mannered Sakuma girl by name. In 1991, Nana began her first year at Omiya Junior High School and quickly formed a wide circle of friends. Having just turned 13, she was beginning to really develop her own personality, and teachers described her as remarkably confident, sociable, and full of energy. On October 26th of that year, just after midterm exams, Nana and 3 of her female classmates spent the day playing together. As the sun set, they still felt like they hadn't had enough fun, and so Nana suggested that they all go back to her apartment to hang out. Her mother was working a night shift, and her grandmother wouldn't mind if she brought a few friends over. Together, the group rode their bikes to Nana's flat and spent the evening watching TV, chatting, and laughing quietly while Granny slept in her room. By midnight, the girls had grown hungry. They checked the kitchen, but found no leftovers in the fridge. As such, Nana proposed going out to buy some onigiris and snacks at the nearby konbini. When they got there, however, they discovered that the convenience store was already closed. One girl remembered that there was a 24-hour mini-stop about 4 kilometers away, and they all agreed to ride there instead. Half an hour later, they reached the convenience store, bought supplies, and started to cycle back to Nana's place. At around 1 AM, while leading the way through a particularly dark and unlit stretch of Tabetacho, Nana turned her head to check on her friends. While doing so, she hit a large branch in the road, one which had likely been blown from a tree by a recent typhoon. It sent Nana tumbling from her bike. It wasn't a bad fall, and the other 3 stopped to help her up. And at that precise moment, a man appeared behind them. He was about 50, wearing a horizontally striped long-sleeve shirt, black trousers, and a black knitted cap. His face was round, his eyes long and sharp, his cheeks red. He stood near a billboard with his hands in his pockets and barked out, "What do you think you're doing?" His tone was so harsh that the 4 girls froze in fear. The man stepped closer. Now beside the girls, he claimed to be a local youth guidance counselor and said that under Japanese regulations, it was illegal for minors to be out past 11 PM without a guardian. At the time, official counselors volunteered throughout the country to prevent juvenile delinquency and promote the healthy growth of minors, though most of these counselors were women. Most worked in groups. Few worked past 9 PM, and all of them wore badges and armbands and carried ID. This man, on the other hand, showed no identification and immediately threatened to call the police, but added that he might change his mind if the group had a good excuse for being out. Frightened and ashamed, the girls lowered their heads and stayed silent. "You kids have been sniffing paint thinner, haven't you?" said the visibly angry man. Scowling, he told them that a representative had to come with him to a police box and explain everything. After scanning their faces for a moment, he pointed directly at Nana. "You, come with me." Perhaps out of fear, or a sense of compliance, Nana didn't argue with the man. He was an authority figure after all. And so, she simply followed him as he led her toward a small side road off Route 126. As she disappeared from view, the man turned back to the remaining 3 girls and bluntly stated, "You don't have to wait. Go home." When one of them asked what to do about Nana's bike, he replied without looking back, "I'll use my truck to transport it later." Taking the counselor at his word, the 3 girls rode back to Nana's apartment complex and waited for her outside. 30 minutes turned into an hour. An hour turned into an hour and a half. As they sat and deliberated, 2 boys that they knew from school passed by, and the girls, who were growing increasingly anxious, told them everything. The boys, who thought the whole situation sounded strange, advised them to tell Nana's family immediately. And since Nana had the only key to the apartment, they banged on the door until her grandmother woke up. Shaken, the grandmother called Nana's mother, who rushed home, and together they searched the entirety of the Wakaba district, including the narrow alley where Nana had last been seen. But terrifyingly, they found no trace of either the missing girl nor the stern man who had led her away. With nowhere left to turn, they called the police at 4:20 AM, only to be told something chilling. There hadn't been any youth guidance counselors on duty along that entire route. The authorities scoured the local roads, knocked on doors, and released a sketch of the suspect based on the girl's description. In time, witnesses began to come forward. At 10:30 PM on the 26th, several hours before Nana went missing, a tipster had seen a suspicious-looking man who resembled the sketch wandering near the back of a driving school in Sakazuki-cho, about 1 kilometer from where the teen was taken. 20 minutes after Nana was escorted away, at 1:20 AM on the 27th, a truck driver reported seeing a girl with an adult at the Sakazuki intersection, roughly 260 meters from the abduction site. At 2:15 AM, another witness claimed to have seen a girl and a man walking along Monorail Street, about 300 meters from Chishirodaikita station. There are also unconfirmed reports of a man and a girl walking towards a residential area near that same station at that same time. Over 150 officers searched the 4-kilometer area around the abduction site, but no evidence connected to the crime was found. No ransom call was ever made, and no further leads presented themselves. The man's confident approach suggested that this may not have been his first rodeo, but investigators were unable to link Nana's disappearance to any other missing persons reports in the local area. Despite leaflets, sketches, and endless investigations, the case stagnated. Decades passed. The other girls grew up, had kids of their own, but Nana never came home. Her grandmother died within a year of her disappearance, reportedly from shock and guilt. Her mother moved away after their apartment was demolished in 2001. She still visits shrines, bowing and praying for her daughter's safe return, a prospect that feels more and more impossible with each passing year. To this day, discussion continues on internet forums. Some find it hard to believe that an opportunistic kidnapper just so happened to be in that precise spot where Nana fell. His comment about putting her bike in the back of his van suggested that he may have been following the group in a vehicle, but if so, none of the girls saw or heard him before he suddenly emerged from the darkness. Others have a more chilling theory, that the large branch laying horizontal on that pitch-black stretch of road hadn't been blown there by strong winds, but had been strategically placed there. That the man was hiding in the shadows just off the roadside, watching, waiting, hoping that some unsupervised child would spring his trap. That might seem unlikely given the late hour and the amount of luck required for his plan to work, but who knows how many nights he may have gone out fishing for prey. Who knows how many other times it may have worked. But perhaps the most haunting theory really is the simplest, that the man was just there, ready to act on a moment's notice, and the only thing stopping other ordinary-looking monsters like him is the right opportunity. One Japanese YouTuber, Incidents, Society and Life, has explored a more specific theory, that a man known as Suspect A, arrested in the late 1960s for a series of assaults, may actually be connected to Nana's case. Suspect A was convicted of impersonating a juvenile officer or police officer to lure school-age girls into isolated areas, usually stairwells or storage spaces. He was later caught in Nakano while attempting to coerce another girl. In 1991, Nana Sakuma was also taken by a man pretending to be a juvenile officer, which closely mirrors Suspect A's early behavior. At the time of Nana's vanishing, Suspect A would have been around 52 years old, which aligns with the witness reports. ISL speculates that Nana's abduction may have been impulsive, triggered by a kind of psychological relapse or compulsion, and that the suspect may have taken her to a temporary residence, dormitory, or workplace where the crime escalated. Suspect A is currently 86 years old and still lives close to where Nana disappeared. This theory, however, remains unconfirmed. Years after the incident, rumours circulated that National Route 126 was used by North Korean agents throughout the 90s, raising the possibility that, like Megumi Yokata and others, Nana was abducted by foreign operatives and smuggled to the Hermit Kingdom. Again, no concrete evidence was ever found to support that theory, and given that the unsub had an authentically Japanese accent, it's more likely that the evil in this case was homegrown. To some, the only real question that remains is whether Nana was trafficked or buried. If the former, Nana Sakuma would be 47 years old today. If the latter, her remains have yet to be found. Regardless, given that the statute of limitations in this case expired before Japan's legal revisions, if the perpetrator is ever identified, then legally speaking, he'll be untouchable. Fortune tellers, mystics, spiritual advisors. There's no shortage of them in Japan. On any given day, you'll see their shops on busy streets, offering palm readings or tarot card sessions for a couple of $1,000. Most are harmless hustlers selling vague hope to the superstitious, but not all of them are playing games. In the case of 74-year-old Hirohito Shibuya, things were far more sinister. Unlike the street corner psychics, Old Man Shibuya ran his operation from a private residence in Higashi Yamato, a quiet, residential bedroom community in West Tokyo. Neighbors noticed the same unsettling pattern. A steady flow of women, both new assistants and new clients, entering his home, but almost never leaving. After just one visit, he somehow convinced each of them to drop their families, their obligations, their entire lives, and marry him, one after another. And by early 2023, he had built himself a polygamy cult consisting of 9 wives and the 3 children he had had with them. These women weren't just his followers though. They were obsessed with him, devoted even, and that devotion frankly made no sense to outsiders. Shibuya wasn't young. He wasn't charming in any conventional way, but what he lacked in looks, he made up for in manipulative charisma. Shibuya began building his network of so-called concubine brides as early as the year 2000 after setting up his fortune teller business. In his own words, he had discovered the power of a seduction spell in a dream, one which made him popular with women and young girls, a way to brainwash them and have them dote on his every whim, a way to turn them into his slaves. But what he called magic, most would call psychological manipulation. Gradually, he lured women aged between 20 and 49 to his home by placing ads in the local paper for fortune-telling assistants. Of course, the type of person who applies for that type of role is going to be more susceptible to manipulation than the average person. From there, the pattern was almost always the same. Shibuya would isolate his target, plant the fear of supernatural harm, and present himself as the only person who could protect her. "A demonic soul is haunting you," he'd say. "Only I can save you from it." And due to a strange mix of fear, naivety, and delusion, many believed him wholeheartedly, and chose to devote their lives to their savior, living with him and catering to his every desire. Once he had that woman under his control, he'd only allow them to leave his home unaccompanied to work and bring home money. On average, each wife was bringing home 80,000 yen per month, all of which went directly to their patriarch, Shibuya. Determined to increase both his bank balance and bride balance, the mystic then ordered each wife to recruit new members from their workplace. But those co-workers they brought home weren't always as gullible as the first wave of recruits. So, when psychological manipulation failed, Shibuya would resort to blackmail and intimidation. In 2006, for example, he'd been arrested and indicted after threatening a woman in her 20s, forcing her to live with him and his other wives, and, in the words of prosecutors, scaring her into consenting to intercourse, which obviously isn't consent, but this is early 2000s Japan we're talking about. When the woman didn't fall for Shibuya's usual mind tricks, he instead told her, "If you don't do what I say, you'll be chopped up, minced, and processed at a nearby factory." He also stated that if she ever tried to leave, she'd be, quote, ground up. At least some of Shibuya's wives helped to keep her imprisoned in the home. Thankfully, the woman was eventually able to escape and went straight to the authorities. Unfortunately, the media didn't take Shibuya's crimes seriously at the time, referring to him in headlines as Harem Man, and treating his antics as more of a joke than anything serious or malicious. Though accused of polygamy, which is illegal in Japan, Shibuya technically hadn't broken the law, as he had divorced each of his wives shortly after marrying them and giving them his name, and as such, was never actually wed to more than one at a time. Because of that, the only things he was found guilty of were coercion and intimidation. In court, he promised the judge that he would stop living with multiple women, and that he'd send each of them back to their parents' homes. "I never want to do anything like this again," he said. Convinced, the judge gave him a 1 year and 6 month sentence, suspended for 4 years, meaning that Shibuya didn't have to spend a single day in prison. After the 2006 case, many parents arrived at Shibuya's home to pick up their brainwashed daughters. According to locals, they stood outside the house day and night for months, but their daughters never came out. Shibuya put up signs around the house saying, "Keep out," and installed around 10 security cameras for good measure. Surprisingly, that worked, and the parents simply gave up. Over time, neighbors noted that those formerly blonde-haired girls in high heels and ultra miniskirts grew old in that house alongside Mr. Shibuya. As you can probably guess, he had carried on controlling his victims, not with chains, but with fear, of curses, of spirits, and later, of alien abduction. In mid-2022, a teenage girl, whose name hasn't been revealed, was lured to Shibuya's home by his 43-year-old wife, Chiaki. Once inside, Shibuya emerged in a black hooded robe, cornered the young girl, and forced her to watch television footage of aliens and UFOs for around 6 hours in an attempt to make her believe in their existence. During that session, Shibuya reportedly told her, "You're going to die soon. You'll be abducted by aliens, skinned and eaten. They'll replace you with a copy of yourself." The only way to avoid such a terrible fate, he told the girl, was to allow him to have his way with her. Though the girl initially resisted, Shibuya gradually ground her down. After the crime, Shibuya tried to keep the adolescent quiet by telling her things like, "If you mention this to other people or the police, I won't be able to help you." He then told her to come back for additional alien resistance sessions, which went on for 2 months. In December, he tried to pull the same trick again on another teenager Chiaki brought home, telling this girl, "The bottom line is, you'll die soon. You'll be taken away by aliens. To be saved, we must become a couple." In both instances, Chiaki assisted Shibuya in convincing the girls of the existence of extraterrestrials. Thankfully, the second girl spoke to her family about the situation, who in turn contacted the police. When officers finally knocked on Shibuya's door on February 7th, 2023, the old man resisted by spraying bear repellent through a crack in the door, injuring the faces of 6 policemen. Eventually, they forced an entry. It was then that the full extent of the group's cult-like lifestyle was revealed. Authorities arrested Shibuya and Chiaki on suspicion of constructive forcible intercourse. This time, the Japanese public were calling for a more serious sentence than what he had received 2 decades prior. In court, Shibuya stated, "Do you want to know why I believe in aliens and UFOs? It's because I've met an alien before. I was told that there was a plan to reduce the world's population, and that Japanese women were being targeted. I was told that the only way to save them from aliens was to have relations with them." He denied the charges against him, saying, "I never forced anyone to do anything. I only told people what appeared in my dreams." The jury was unconvinced. Pending their sentence hearing, both Chiaki and Shibuya were allowed to return to their home and continue living with the rest of their family. However, in December 2024, Chiaki was discovered dead inside the residence. There isn't much information available online about how her life came to an end. Then, in January 2025, just 1 day before his sentence ruling, Shibuya's remaining wives found him dead inside the house. Authorities determined that he had ended his own existence. Hirohito Shibuya's sudden death closed the legal case against him, but left countless questions unanswered. How many wives did he control over the decades? How many still live with the trauma? And how could one man maintain such a powerful hold over so many victims for so long without intervention? While researching this case, I couldn't help but be reminded of Futoshi Matsunaga, the Japanese mind control killer who I did a deep dive on some years ago. Thankfully, in Shibuya's case, he didn't use his victims to kill other people like Futoshi. But we all know where his type of perverse narcissism tends to lead in the end, so I'm glad his operation was exposed in time. Before she became a viral meme, Yuka Takaoka was, by all accounts, an ordinary young woman trying to find her place in Tokyo. Born in China, she moved to Japan when she was just 2 years old. From there, she grew up quietly in Hokkaido, the type of girl classmates described as shy but sweet, someone who preferred drawing, anime, and online communities to crowded social spaces. After finishing school, she moved to the capital to study design, but like many young newcomers, she struggled to find stability. According to the press, she eventually shifted into the nightlife industry, starting at a girls' bar before transitioning to full-time hostessing in Kabukicho. What most people outside of Japan don't realize is just how circular that world really is. Hostesses spend their nights comforting lonely men, flattering them, listening to their problems. But then, when their shift ends, many of them fall into the same emotional dependencies they see in their customers. In Shinjuku, it's an open secret. Many hostesses spend their entire earnings on hosts, the male counterpart to their own job. It's a sort of cycle of loneliness. The fantasy relationships they perform for their clients become the ones that they start craving for themselves. And, according to her former co-workers, Yuka slipped into that same feedback loop almost immediately. In fact, that's how she met the man who would come to dominate her thoughts, a club fusion host known as Runa. In nightlife circles, he was a rising star. Stylish, effortlessly charming, soft-spoken, and skilled at making any woman feel like she mattered by remembering personal details about her, doting on her, laughing at her jokes, and generally acting chivalrous. For most of his customers, it was a scripted fantasy they willingly bought into. For Yuka though, it was the real deal, and thoughts of Runa consumed her mind. She admired him in a way fans admire an idol, intensely, and without the emotional boundaries that most adults develop. She started visiting Runa at the club 3 times a week, reportedly spending upwards of 50,000 yen per visit, and racking up a huge amount of debt in the process. To keep up with her tri-weekly visits to the host club, she began working for a delivery health service, a common euphemism for an escort. She hated the work, and never told Runa the truth, inventing a story about a sugar daddy who simply took her on trips in exchange for cash. Runa personally thanked her for going on those sugar daddy vacations. After all, the money she spent on him at the club helped to improve his host ranking, a publicly displayed score which directly correlated with his own earnings. And when it came to making money, Runa was extremely driven. Before becoming a host, he'd been living rough and had no other qualifications to fall back on. The young man had no intention of slipping down the scoreboard and losing his new high-paying job. And so, he casually tossed around words like, "I love you," which meant little to him, but everything to Yuka. He even took her to love hotels after his shift to keep her loyal, just like he did with many of his other customers. Yuka always paid for the room. To cut out the middleman, Yuka leased a 5th-floor apartment near Runa's workplace, certain that they were destined to be together. She even told friends that she wanted to, quote, devote herself entirely to him. If Runa failed to answer one of her calls, if one of her messages went unread, if he refused to come over and see her, then she would threaten to jump off the rooftop. He had to be available, always. He was her boyfriend after all. But he didn't see things that way. Runa undoubtedly cared about Yuka on some level, but at the end of the day, he was a host. His job depended on him being available and flirtatious. Having a public girlfriend could destroy his sales. He always tried to calm Yuka down, telling her that he may quit in the autumn so that they could be together properly. He meant it hypothetically, but Yuka took it as a promise, as a certainty. Still, Runa continued to spend time with his other female clients, and that slowly ate away at Yuka. In a journal entry, she wrote, "I want to be a tragic heroine. How is it possible for him to look at other women than me? I know killing him is for the best. If I kill him, it'll be eternal, and there'll be no pain afterwards. I don't know anything other than him." By May 2019, the tension between the two had curdled. After having drinks with a female client on the 22nd, Runa stopped by Yuka's apartment to help her clean and to put up some curtains. Exhausted, he ran a bath, dozed off in the tub, and later collapsed into Yuka's bed. While he slept, Yuka took the opportunity to go through his phone and discovered photos of him sitting with another woman at the bar. The pictures showed nothing remotely intimate. He was just doing what he always did at work. But in Yuka's increasingly unstable mind, it was proof of an unforgivable betrayal. And so, at around 3:50 AM on the 23rd, Yuka walked quietly into the kitchenette, took a fruit knife, and returned to the bedroom. She knelt beside Runa, watched him for a moment, and then plunged the blade into his abdomen with enough force to puncture internal organs. Runa, of course, woke up, at first feeling no pain whatsoever. He asked Yuka what she was doing. That's when she removed the blade, a medically disastrous thing to do, and as it scraped its way out, the agony finally hit Runa. He crawled into the hallway, leaving a trail of blood across the floorboards. He made his way out of the apartment and towards the elevator. Yuka followed him slowly, watching as he made his way into the lobby. She asked Runa whether he loved her. He responded, "Yes, just call an ambulance." "No," she replied. "Let's die together." A neighbor, hearing Runa's faint cries for help, called emergency services. When officers arrived, they found exactly the scene a bystander would later photograph. Yuka sitting beside the bleeding host, her shirt soaked with his blood, her expression flat and distant. She was on the phone with one of her friends, talking casually about other matters. That image exploded across Japanese Twitter, then the global internet. She was instantly labelled the real-life Yandere. In Japanese fiction, a Yandere is a type of character, one who starts off sweet and affectionate, but later becomes possessive, delusional, and violent. And Yuka, with her blunt-cut bangs, delicate features, and chillingly calm demeanour, seemed to fit that archetype with unnerving precision. Yandere obsessives would later start a GoFundMe to bail her out, and even raised around $3,000. Runa slipped into a coma for nearly a week. Doctors said he only had a 20% chance of survival, yet miraculously, he pulled through. He spent more than a month in hospital, unable at first to speak or walk. Nightmares tormented him, recurring visions of Yuka twisting her body to crawl through his hospital window. He became so frightened she'd find him that he asked to be placed in a windowless room. However, he later said that he bore no hatred towards her, understood her point of view, and was working on becoming a better person himself. In an interview, he explained, "If possible, I want people to be able to live a normal life rather than paying for their sins." Following the incident, Runa restyled himself and became Phoenix Luna, a nod to his close call with death and his subsequent rebirth. Despite no longer being able to drink due to the liver damage he had sustained in the attack, he's now a more popular host than he was before, known as the boy to kill for. His earnings have increased substantially. Meanwhile, Yuka underwent psychiatric evaluation and confessed to everything immediately. In handwritten letters later released to the media, she said, "I stabbed him because I love him so much, I couldn't help it." She described the act as a kind of shared death, insisting she never intended to stab anyone else. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Yuka's obsession had crossed into delusion, that she had constructed a fantasy romance around a man whose job was to literally sell emotional intimacy. They said she wasn't just jealous, she wanted to possess him completely, and when she felt that slipping away, she chose destruction over abandonment. In December 2019, the Tokyo District Court sentenced her to 3 years and 6 months in prison. Many considered it shockingly lenient for attempted murder. Others pointed to her remorse, her confession, and her lack of a criminal history. The media also reported that she reached a civil settlement with Runa, reportedly around 5 million yen, or $40,000 at the time. She also sent him a direct apology letter, in which she said sorry more than a dozen times, which clearly proved she was remorseful. The judge took that letter into account, and I really hope it's not the actual reason for her short sentence. After the incident, Yuka became an online icon. Fans flooded social media with original artwork, cosplays, tribute videos, and memes, all dedicated to Yandere-Chan. Yuka started appearing in Yandere fan edits, TikToks, profile pictures, and even became a symbol of the PN aesthetic. Her worshippers described her as the beautiful criminal, making them the male equivalent of those women who gushed over this dude's mugshot back in the day. The more Yuka was condemned by mainstream society, the more her cult of personality grew. Even today, long after her release, she remains a popular figure online, with tens of thousands of followers across Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. To some, she's a cautionary tale about the host club ecosystem. To others, disturbingly, she's an icon. In reality though, Yuka Takaoka is just a young woman whose loneliness spiraled into delusion, and whose obsession nearly cost a man his life. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. I do enjoy covering these Japanese mysteries. It's helpful having a Japanese wife to help me with the translations. But let me know what you thought of this bunch of stories, mysteries. I guess there's both types in this video. And I'll be back again very soon with some more content for you. Before the video ends, I'd like to say a huge thank you to my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters. Holly Lyons, Gina Valera, Blaze420, Terry Ford, Colin Monsma, Connor Louthan, Hamish, Alana Pons, Azrael Warakai, Peter Lulgjuraj, TNS Mum, Asia Mina, George Lopez, Farewelltattoosjaxfl, Yokai, Mistyblue Longie, Aðalsteinn Traustason, John Stewart Muller, Tom Foulds, Redacted Pluto, and Hamish K. Thank you guys so much for your continued support.